right, let's look at some other ways of dealing with depression now. So, the type of therapy that seems to work well with depression is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And they've identified some thoughts that I wanted to share with you that seem to be typical of depressed patients. So, maybe if you catch yourself thinking these thoughts, or if you know somebody that's depressed and you see these tendencies, then, maybe you could work with them on changing them. So, so let's look at these thought patterns. So, there's this dynamic which is internal versus external. Whenever you see a situation, people who tend to get depressed is they blame themselves. Like, for example, maybe someone didn't get a job and they say, "Oh, I'm just a terrible person. Of course, I'm not going to get that job. Of course not. It's me. I'm just not worthy." Whereas somebody who's not depressed might look at it externally and say, well, maybe the universe felt like that wasn't the job for me, or maybe I wouldn't fit in with them. Maybe there's something better out there waiting for me. It's not me. It's external things are causing this, and it's actually going to help me that this bad thing happened. So, a more healthy way of thinking about negative events that happen to us are kind of like Freud's rationalization. Like, it's because of other reasons. It's not because I'm a bad, unworthy person. Whereas people who tend for depression, they blame themselves. Okay, so then there's this other dynamic, which is global versus specific. So, I like to call this the snowball effect. I can kind of do it with students actually. Is Let's say that somebody doesn't do well on a test, and it's just one test, and what they do is, "Oh no, I didn't do well on that test." And now that I didn't do well on that test, that one test is going to bring down my whole grade. And if I don't get an A in that class, then, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get into the grad school. And, it's like, if I don't get in the grad school, then everything that I've worked for in life is not going to happen. And my God, my life is just a failure. I just need to give up now. Whereas someone else who has like a non-depressed way of thinking might just say, "Oh, well, I failed that one test. Hopefully I'll do better. I'll learn from that, and I'll do better on all the other tests, and hopefully I can still get my grade up. But even if I get a B, I'm sure I could get an A in other classes, or I'm sure I could do well in other classes." And there's all kinds of avenues that I could go through to get to where I want in life. It's just one test is a very minor aspect of my life. Recently I saw a quote, and the quote said, "Whatever you're worried about right now, a year from now, you probably won't even remember that it happened." And that's kind of like thinking about these negative things that happen to us, looking at it and say, "Well, it's just a little small part of my life," and focus on all the other things that are going well. So there's so many quotes with this one, is focus on what you do have instead of what you don't have. So on, and it's so minor. Don't sweat the small stuff. All kinds of things like that. But people who are depressed tend to make this big something negative happens and like it ruins everything. "Oh, someone broke up with me, and oh no, now I'm going to be lonely for the rest of my life. I need to just give up, forget about it. I just renounce everyone." Whereas somebody who's got a more specific says, "Oh, well, that relationship didn't work out for me, but I have so many other great relationships in my life, or I have so many other great things in my life that, yes, that little compartment is kind of sad, but let's focus on all the other things that are doing well." Okay, another dynamic that you see with this kind of depressed thinking is this dynamic of stable versus unstable. And I know that doesn't make sense because we always want stable, but in this case, we don't want stable. Is people who have a tendency for depression, they tend to think that whatever was going on in their life is going to be forever. It's never going to change. Whereas people who tend to have non-depressed ways of thinking, they say, oh, I'm going through a hard time right now, but I know in the future it's going to get better. And so, for example, maybe some of you are going through feeling so overwhelmed by all the class. All your courses are requiring you so much. You're so tired. And like somebody who gets depressed, there's like, oh, I'm never going to not feel this way. Whereas somebody who has maybe a healthier way says, oh, I only have a few more weeks of this and then it's going to be better. This is great. Things are going to get better. Things will change. There is hope. So I just wanted to share this with you is basically, let's summarize really healthier thinking is, there may be reasons that this happened that are not about me, not taking things personally. And then saying, something bad happened, but let's look at all the good things that are going on. And then finally, everything will change. This too shall pass. So hopefully that helps you, with all of us. Let's go on to some other alternative theories. So those are kind of some thoughts with the cognitive behavioral therapy. And now other types of treatment. So ECT. Now, this seems like a scary thing, but actually it's pretty helpful now. So in the past, whether you had all these crazy, like that they were giving them 100 times a day and these terrible seizures. And I think American Horror Story actually has one episode on that. And but now it's given in emergency cases. Like if somebody is really, really suicidal and nothing else seems to be working, then ECT, applying a seizure to the brain, and I'm going to show you guys a video. I think it's really well done. It's not scary or anything, so you can see how it actually goes. Is they're going to give them muscle relaxants, maybe some anesthesia. They're going to relax them. And it's going to be done with their consent, and they're going to give them a seizure on one side of the brain. So can you guess which one? Which hemisphere, remember from past, one of the past module lectures, which hemisphere is giving them problems? I'm not going to tell you. I want you to think. Okay, so if you had to choose which hemisphere to give a seizure to for someone who's depressed, what would you do? Okay, the right hemisphere, right? Because the right is the one that's causing problems. So if we create a seizure in that and stop that from working, then, the left hemisphere can kick in. So how does this work? We are not sure. Once again, I've been thinking about this lecture and I'm like, good gosh, it feels like we still live back in the Victorian age where we were experimenting with so many things and giving people crazy things. And it feels like kind of we're still there in a little sense of it as I'm going over these lectures. But anyway, again, it increases the proliferation of neurons in the hippocampus. That seems to be the key. We got to get that hippocampus neurons growing. And it alters expression of at least 120 genes in the hippocampus and frontal cortex alone. The big problem with this one, and the reason why you're giving it to just one hemisphere, is because it used to be memory loss. But the memory loss wouldn't last that long, but still, that's not very comfortable, but would last for some months. But now, since they give it to just one hemisphere, you don't have as much memory loss. And they give it to them about every other day over 2 weeks. And it works fast. When nothing else is working, let's try that. But there's a problem with relapse, so you seem to have to come back and do that. So now what we're going to do is we are going to watch a video so you can experience what ECT is and maybe not think of it as so scary.
ECT has changed all of my moods back to the person I used to be, which is incredible. I actually spent 3 months not coming out of my house. I wouldn't even walk out the door. It got so bad at one point. I tried to kill myself 6 times in the past few years.
How are you today?
Good. How are you, Ava?
So since your last treatment, have you had any problems?
No. Actually, it's been really good.
So it's essentially the fastest working antidepressant.
And the most effective, an acutely suicidal person who needs urgent, immediate response. And ACT is the gold standard treatment for that type of depression. Forget it. I'll still see you afterwards.
Yeah, so the only thing I'd ever seen was the things that I had seen in movies. And I, of course, got the, one flew over the cuckoo's nest type reaction to it. And when I first came in, I was pretty nervous. I was terrified. They made it so much easier, and the staff here are so incredibly friendly.
It's a small amount of current. It's nothing like what's in the outlet at home, okay? The level at which just the smallest amount of energy can induce a generalized seizure. So yeah, just take some nice deep breaths in with the oxygen. That's where it'll get you off to sleep.
I don't remember any of it. I don't feel any of it, so there's no pain involved.
And these are the stimulus electrodes, basically just the way to deliver the energy. The amount of electricity is tiny. So it's ultra safe. She's on a heart monitor, brainwave monitor, oxygen. And this machine tells us when it's safe. It has some safety protocols. The sounds we're hearing are just warning us that the electricity is going to be delivered. That whole sound means the electricity is being delivered. And that's the stimulus. Then we watch to see if her body moves, which is moving a bit. That's not uncomfortable at all for Melody. The seizure's already stopped and we're done. That was it. And that returns her to normal. Isn't that cool?
I'm back to 100% at work. I'm back to 100% at home. And I'm watching everything improve. And it was like one day a light bulb just kind of went off and I found me again. And all of a sudden the sun seemed brighter, the world was better. Why not take a chance and give yourself the opportunity to have the rest of your life back?
All right, so this is an interesting one, and as I was preparing this lecture, I went and looked it up, and I said, that's kind of interesting. Let's see where we can get that done. So I saw that there's clinics in both Pasadena and Santa Monica, and I know some of you take classes very far from campus, but maybe you could Google it. But basically, they're just applying a very strong magnet to your brain, and that seems to stimulate the axons I put here the surface of the brain, near the surface of the brain. So this is kind of a interesting therapy too. So if nothing else is working, maybe you could try this transcranial magnetic stimulation. I didn't look up the prices, but it's just a magnet, so maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Okay, now this one, sleep pattern therapy. So what I used to teach a long time ago is I always taught that definitely if you have a tendency for depression, you want to stay busy. Like there's a part of me, that kind of new agey part of me. I love the neuroscience, but sometimes I like to dabble in the out there kind of stuff. Is like I kind of wonder if sometimes depression is like a message from your inner being about like, hey, you're not on the right path. You know how we learned in the last chapter that if things aren't right in your body, then the way your body communicates to you is kind of gets sick. It says things aren't right, and when you get sick, you're going to have to change. You're going to have to change your ways because you can't keep going in the same direction. And I'm wondering if depression is kind of like an illness like that, where it's kind of saying, hey, you need to be on a different path. So anyway, a lot of us, when we're not quite happy with life, we oversleep. And this is what we used to teach. We used to teach that when you sleep extra, that it kind of depletes the serotonin. Because you find that, and I believe that I've gone over that in other chapters when I went over serotonin, is you kind of wait, when you sleep in because you don't really have anything better to do, and you sleep in for long periods of time, you wake up and you're just like, oh, I feel like a zombie all day, groggy. Because it depleted the serotonin when you spend extra time sleeping. You tend to spend the extra time in the REM sleep, and this seems to deplete the serotonin. And then we talk about like when you're so depressed, sometimes what you do is you lay down on the couch and you just sleep for 4 hours at a time because I have nothing else like that I want to do right now. I'm not motivated. Maybe the key to life is finding our path and finding what our passion is and following that passion and living each day, kind of working on our passion. And so maybe this is like something saying we have to find that, but that's just the crazy new age stuff. Don't even listen to me there. But in any case, they found that if you keep somebody awake all night, the depression seems to go away. You're cranky and grouchy, but you don't seem to be depressed. So this sleep pattern therapy that's in your textbook, it kind of says that people who have depression have this sleep pattern tendency where you fall asleep early and you go into REM sleep pretty quick, like 45 minutes, when you're normally supposed to go in about 90 minutes in, and then they wake up too early. But this one they're saying, maybe try going to bed even earlier so you can get your REM sleep at like the 90-minute mark instead of the 45-minute mark to get you back on track with a normal and then slowly move it up. And they said that this relieves depression for about a week or so. Just to go back to my new agey kind of crazy way, just for fun, is I remember watching a Wayne Dyer special. I don't know if you guys know him. He's kind of one of those new age gurus, and it seems like a lot of people have sleep problems. And I definitely find when I teach my group dynamics classes, a lot of times, I would say half my classes say that they have sleep problems. And I thought it was interesting in the textbook how it talks about that they saw that teenagers who had massive sleep problems within the next 6 or 7 years, they had a tendency for depression. So the sleep seems to be involved with depression. But I remember, just final sharing of this with you, is Dr. Wayne Dyer. He said, instead of going against your insomnia, to thank it and to ask it for what it's telling you. And he said, when you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, get up. He wants you to get up. Get up and say, what am I supposed to be doing? Why are you waking me up? What is it that you want me to do with my life? And I think it's just kind of a fun thing to add on to I'm doing this alternative therapy, and we did the cognitive behavioral therapy. And like looking at it, and instead of being angry that we can't sleep, what if we turned to it and said, oh, I can't sleep. This gives me an opportunity to read a book or listen to a book that I've always wanted to listen to. Or maybe I could exercise a little bit more this morning because I'm up. Or maybe I could clean out something that I've been putting off for a long time. Or maybe I could get out my bucket list and start working on how I'm going to check these off. Or maybe I could write a thank you note to somebody that's done something incredible for me. So again, we're just back to this whole this how your brain, we can change it with medication, and then maybe also we can look at life differently. All right. This one, deep brain stimulation, I don't know too much about it here. It's pretty brand new. I got to learn more about this, but I did find you a picture to show you, and it says it's still in experimental stages, and they implant a battery-powered device into the brain to deliver periodic brain stimulation. So I thought I'd just share a picture because your textbook is talking about it, but I think we're going to stop here with this alternative therapies, and maybe it's given you something to think about.